For centuries, the Pentateuch was accepted as a unified historical record authored by Moses around 1400 BC. That consensus eventually split. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the rise of higher criticism dismantled the traditional understanding of biblical authorship. German scholars replaced the unified text with an evolutionary model, theorizing the Pentateuch was a patchwork of later sources, J, E, D, and P. The earliest was dated 850 BC. Later scholars argued these documents were the final resting place for loose oral traditions. These critical frameworks examine the Pentateuch as an assemblage of ideological legends. The focus shifts from historical reporting to the cultural settings of the later writers, who supposedly compiled the folklore. The foundational figure in this shift was Julius Wellhausen, who taught in the theological faculty at the University of Greifswald in Germany. In 1882, Wellhausen resigned his professorship. In his resignation letter, he demonstrated remarkable candor, writing, "I became a theologian because I was interested in the scientific treatment of the Bible. Yet it slowly dawned upon me that a professor of theology has the task of preparing students for service in the Protestant Church, and that I am not adequate to perform this practical task." Wellhausen stepped down out of conscience, recognizing his theories undermined the faith he supported. Yet the scholars who adopted his ideas did not resign. American students studied under Wellhausen's disciples in Germany, returning to the United States to seed his theories across mainstream theological seminaries. Among those building on Wellhausen's work was his contemporary, Hermann Gunkel. Gunkel accepted the fractured documentary hypothesis and expanded its timeline into the pre-literary era. Wellhausen isolated the documents, and Gunkel isolated the oral traditions. Together, they constructed the analytical distance that defines the modern history of religions approach, turning the text into an artifact to be dissected rather than a history to be trusted. This timeline maps the traditional anchors of Israel's history. We have Moses and the Exodus around 1400 BC, King David at 1000 BC, the fall of the northern kingdom to Assyria in 721 BC, and the fall of the southern kingdom to Babylon in 586 BC. Wellhausen's documentary source hypothesis claims the Pentateuch was not written during the time of Moses, but is instead a mosaic compiled by redactors long after the Babylonian exile. He sequenced the text into 4 layers. First came the J source, favoring the divine name Jehovah, placed around 850 BC. Next was the E or Elohim source, assigned to 750 BC. Then came the D or Deuteronomy source at 621 BC, during the reign of Josiah. Finally, the P or priestly document was written around 450 BC, 1,000 years after the events it supposedly records. Wellhausen argued that complex theological concepts found in Genesis, like circumcision, covenant, and election, did not exist during the time of the patriarchs. He claimed these were Babylonian-era ideas invented by the late P writers and projected backward into the past. This timeline was built on an evolutionary premise. Wellhausen assumed all human religion develops in a strict sequence, starting with primitive polytheism, evolving into henotheism, the belief that one's local god is superior, and finally maturing into monotheism. He mapped this religious evolution onto his documents. The early J and E sources reflect primitive natural religion. The D source represents an ethical prophetic religion, and the late P source embodies a highly structured ceremonial priestly religion. There is no physical evidence for any of this. In the entire history of biblical archaeology, no independent J, E, D, or P document has ever been discovered. They are entirely hypothetical constructs. By forcing the text into this evolutionary framework, the historical narratives of the Old Testament are reduced to anachronistic fabrications. The history of Israel is rewritten, not based on what the text says, but on what an evolutionary model requires it to say. Look closely at the J block on this diagram. Hermann Gunkel accepted Wellhausen's documents, but recognized that authors do not generate material from thin air. He argued the documents were merely the final crystallization of older disjointed oral traditions. To study this, Gunkel developed Formgeschichte, or the history of forms. This methodology attempts to penetrate behind the written text to isolate specific, independent story units that existed long before they were written down. Once a story unit was isolated, Gunkel required the scholar to determine its Gattung, or literary genre. Is the unit a piece of poetry, a prophetic text, or a folk legend? Next, the scholar had to identify the Sitz im Leben, the specific situation in life that would produce such a story. The goal was to reverse engineer the exact sociological environment, cultural tension, or local campfire setting that necessitated the creation of that particular literary form. According to Gunkel, ancient Israel was originally a fractured group of tribes with highly localized folklore. Over centuries, these unrelated oral stories were modified, strung together, and retroactively assigned to singular unifying figures like Abraham. While Gunkel technically acknowledged the material had ancient roots, his methods systematically dismantled the narrative coherence of Genesis. The text was no longer a continuous historical record, but a carefully edited anthology of disparate campfire tales. When applying this method to Genesis, Gunkel classified nearly all of its narratives under one specific genre: etiological legends. In medical science, etiology is the study of what causes a disease. In biblical criticism, an etiological legend is a fictitious story invented retroactively to explain why a contemporary reality exists. The story is generated as an answer to an observation. For example, Gunkel identified ethnological legends. If an ancient Israelite wondered why the Canaanites were subservient, or why the descendants of Lot lived in the eastern deserts, a folk story was invented to justify those existing tribal boundaries and political relationships. He also categorized etymological legends, myths designed to explain the origins of names. Gunkel noted how modern people do this too. You might hear someone claim the word Manhattan comes from a Native American observing an early Dutch settler and exclaiming "Manhattan." Gunkel applied that exact logic to the Bible. He concluded that the Genesis account of the Tower of Babel was not a historical event, but a fictitious etymology invented to explain the linguistic origins of the city's name. Then there were ceremonial legends. If a child asked their father why they practiced circumcision or celebrated the Passover, the true historical origins were assumed lost to time. To relieve the embarrassment, a religious origin myth was drafted to satisfy the question. Finally, he defined geological legends. A striking terrain feature, like the lifeless expanse of the Dead Sea or a pillar of salt resembling a woman, prompted the invention of a story about God's wrath and Lot's wife to explain a local geology. Classifying the text as etiological redefines its purpose. The narrative becomes a justification for contemporary realities, shifting its role away from the preservation of historical facts. This raises an immediate problem. By what exact criteria did Hermann Gunkel confidently separate legend from history? Gunkel was explicit in his methodology. He wrote that the clearest criterion for identifying a legend is that it reports things that are quite incredible. As this flowchart demonstrates, form criticism operates through a rigid filter. It begins with the absolute a priori assumption that miraculous, divine intervention in the physical world is categorically impossible. Gunkel listed his criteria directly. Animals do not speak, no tree confers immortality, and an army cannot be defeated by Abraham's 318 men. Because these events are deemed impossible, any narrative containing them is automatically filtered out of history and dumped into the bucket of legend. This relies heavily on the secular principle of historical analogy, the assumption that if we do not personally experience supernatural events in our modern daily lives, they could not have occurred in ancient history. The logic is circular. A framework assuming divine intervention is impossible will inevitably categorize any record of a miracle as legend. There is an obvious theological counterargument to this approach. Christ and the apostles routinely cited the Genesis narratives, treating the patriarchs and their actions as actual, historical events. Gunkel dismissed this testimony outright. He argued the New Testament authors were simply children of their time, who shared the primitive viewpoints of their era, meaning their endorsement of Genesis holds zero weight for modern literary analysis. Yet, in Gunkel's view, labeling Genesis as legend was not an insult. He argued that legends are a profound form of poetry. To him, historical prose is dry and factual, but poetic legend possesses the aesthetic power necessary to convey the grief and religious emotion of ancient folklore. He was utterly intolerant of the traditional view, writing that anyone who insists on treating Genesis as actual history is a pious barbarian who lacks the aesthetic capacity to appreciate its true poetic worth. Modern critical scholarship frequently claims it is rescuing the religious beauty of the Old Testament from rigid traditionalists. It preserves the emotional impact of the text, but does so at a steep cost, entirely severing biblical faith from the realities of human history.